Hello, 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 and welcome to Wisdom Circles in Concert with the Silver Tent, discussions on menopause transition and other informative, humorous, empowering, sometimes humbling, and often ridiculous stories about aging. My name is Laura Libby, aka Burlesque sensation Ophelia Flame, and I'm excited and honored to be your host for these monthly informative discussions. Today will feature a dear friend of mine, Canadian legend of burlesque, and one badass crone, Miss Judith Stein. But first, I'd like to share a little bit about how we got to this very moment. So, in addition to being a burlesque performer and instructor for the last 30 years, I'm also a group fitness instructor and a massage therapist. But in spite of a love of anatomy and physiology and a deep connection to body awareness, my menopause transition has been a confusing experience that has ranged from, oh, that's different, to what in the holy fuck is going on? I have had a myriad of symptoms ranging from mild to extreme that went really just misdiagnosed or ignored by uninformed medical professionals. And so, in addition, there's really like no one that I knew was talking about it. Because you don't know what you don't know, I just pressed on while my symptoms worsened. And then in 2020, when the world broke, so did I. And it was a perfect storm of hormonal shifts and stress and anxiety and uncertainty and isolation and insecurity and depression, all wrapped up in my own little fresh hell. And suddenly I just felt like I really didn't know who I was anymore or what my purpose was. And I felt like I just really just wanted to disappear, and I sort of did. But what I didn't know then was this is also really a common feeling during this powerful transition. And the reason that so many of us are in the dark about this huge life event involving our very own bodies has a long history of gatekeeping and misogyny and misinformation and shame and fear. And so eventually I reemerged, finding a new sense of self and purpose, as well as some new resources and communities such as the Silver Tent, but I'll share more about that later. And now, 8 years into my own menopausal journey roller coaster, I'm inspired to redefine and demystify aging by empowering women to be seen and heard while finding confidence in living, find pleasure in living at any age. I'm currently studying to become a certified menopause support coach through Burl Education and creating my own program that I plan on launching in 2023, but more on that later too. To clarify these discussions, or for anyone at any age who is assigned an ovarian system, and for the folks that love them, I suspect they will be insightful and probably pretty humorous discussions. By sharing our stories and inherent wisdom, I feel like our discussions build knowledge and offer tools and resources and support so we can better navigate our own experiences. And with an estimated 1.1 million women entering into menopause transition annually, just in the US alone, it's probably a pretty good chance that you or someone that you might know has some pressing questions or even some concerns about this physiological, biological, cultural, familial, and spiritual rite of passage. Menopause is a life change. It is not a disease or an affliction. So just a little bit of clarify some definitions, because there's a lot of misinformation out of there. So some of the language we'll be using today. Perimenopause, and just to clarify, perimenopause begins usually at around age 45, but it's completely different for every person based on personal health history, including mental health and even childhood trauma and PTSD. And this is when the hormones begin to shift. Symptoms can include, but are not limited to, and thankfully usually not all at once, irregular periods, hot flashes, chills, night sweats, mood change, weight gain, slow metabolism, fatigue, insomnia, brain fog, anxiety and depression, irritability, moodiness, and my favorite, vaginal dryness. Woohoo! Good times. Menopause begins when it has been 365 days since you've had a menstrual period and the ovaries are going into retirement, be that on their own or by way of surgery or medical treatments, and that, say, for example, chemotherapy. So if you don't have your period for 11 months and then you get it, what the fuck, you got to start over, right? So it's back to the drawing board. But once that shift happens, you may still be experiencing some symptoms, but they begin to lessen. Post menopause, the promised land, evidently, is where we land and settle into our new transformative selves. And menopause transition is the term for the whole wild ride. So today we'll hear all about our guest's journey. We welcome your questions and comments following our discussion, which I will imagine is going to be lively if you've ever met our friend Judith Stein. But without further ado, Judith Stein, Canadian burlesque legend, the Lady Divine, got her start as a go-go dancer in Eugene, Oregon, and quickly developed her own unique combination of elegant and comedic striptease that took her to the far corners of the world to perform. Recognized both by the Burlesque Hall of Fame in Las Vegas and Canadian Burlesque Hall of Fame, Judith is Canada's official legend of burlesque and calls the little town of Nelson, BC, her home. Her dynamic performances and cheeky wit have made her a beloved feature attraction at burlesque festivals and shows all over North America, Finland, and New Zealand. Please give a warm virtual welcome to the Grand Beaver herself, Miss Judith Stein. Say hello, Judith.
Hey.
Right, hi.
Hey, all right.
Hi, so happy to see you.
Hey, that's great. That was quite an intro. It was like, oh, did I do all that?
Well, Judith, I know you and I have had many hours discussing our various strip club stories, but today I would love to hear more about your experience and your wisdom, or lack of, happens to the best of us, in regard to your own menopause journey. So why don't we start with how old were you and when you started your peri or your menopause journey?
Okay. First of all, I am soon to be 75, so I guess I'm an official crone. I know. How did I get this old? Anyway, I began my period, my menstrual period, when I was 13 years old. I started exhibiting perimenopausal symptoms around 45. I was going through a difficult time in my life, so it was like, I don't know whether it was perimenopause or just my head, but probably a combination of both. My period stopped around the age of 55. And the time was interesting. Luckily, I was in good health. I was a skier. I've been a dancer. And so it was relatively easy. I was very lucky because back in the 70s, the feminist movement started pulling together and talking about menopause. Before it had been like, one doesn't talk about it. That's, there was no knowledge.
Our bodies ourselves. Hallelujah for that book, right?
Yeah, our bodies ourselves. And it was like, I started reading this and it was like, okay. And I had a male doctor and he was hopeless. I found a female doctor who just happened to be going through the same menopausal journey as I was. Hallelujah. And she was more into like, okay, let's deal with this. Also, my therapist was going through menopause. So it was like, I found a group where we were able to share our knowledge, debunked some of the myths around menopause. Because back in my day, like growing up, and listening to my mother's friends. Now we're talking like in the 50s, 60s, where it was all about father knows best. And, though I did like Leave It to Beaver.
Of course you did.
I left it to the beaver. Anyway, so it was like, women were supposed to be this, little apron, the little woman, right? Well, the feminism came in and we started talking about women's empowerment. So my journey, I feel like I was fairly lucky. I had a lot of other things going on. I've just gotten out of an abusive relationship. And
I'm sorry can I pause you for just a second? Because you said
Sure.
something that was really interesting that I want to touch on, is because it's generationally, right? So your generation is really at 75. You're really you're a baby boomer.
I'm a crone.
You're a crone, but you're also in that baby boomer
Yeah.
generation, right? And
Yes.
how fascinating that it really, and I just sort of thought about this right now, that it's certainly there were women before, but the baby boomers like had more women who had gone through the medical system, who were now in doctors. When you were young, there was probably not very many women doctors. But how cool is it that you were able to see this generation to finally meet women, though I bet they were probably still in the minority of
Yes.
your therapist and doctors who could relate, like, yeah, we're going through this experience, and they had context. And there is so much, there has been historically so much, I mean, just like a lot of women's health, some fucked up history about, there was a time in probably your mother's generation, this is only a couple generations, where if you were not disagreeable, as you said, in the apron, and you were feeling some depression or anxiety, they put you in a fucking institution. They
That's
literally
right.
put it like, my wife is not agreeable, there's something wrong with her, she can't have children anymore, she's no longer feminine.
Replace her.
Replace her, like get rid of her or replace her. And it's really interesting, and I that there is that also in that time of the 60s. I think it was in mid 60s. I think there was a doctor, a gynecologist. Oh gosh, I'm completely forgetting his name right now. Who wrote a book, and I don't know if you're familiar with it, but it is Forever Feminine. Have you heard of this book, Forever Feminine?
Yes.
So Webster, I think is his last name, and he was really instrumental in medicalizing menopause as an affliction, and that's something that is just a deficiency of estrogen, which is like the fountain of youth. Not true, but and so he was very much in the forefront of hormone replacement therapy. And so while there's great value in hormone replacement therapy, in menopause transition, it was such a swinging pendulum of like combining all of that shame and all of that, where women were told that they were basically, literally, the terms were used as become eunuchs. They were as close to a man without being a woman.
Yes.
That the only answer was to take hormone replacement therapy. And so even his wife, never mind, get off my soapbox in 1 second, because I'm dying to hear what you have to say. But because we were in the timeline, I really wanted to like hit that nugget of, because it's part of the reason why we don't know about most women that I know have a lot of questions and there's a lot of confusion, a lot of misinformation. So, and due in part to the history of a lot of this misogyny and gatekeeping, and just our very medicalized idea of what menopause is. So that last note on the author, he and his wife, she had his son revealed recently that she had 3 bouts of breast cancer, died of breast cancer, of which they kept secret, because
Yes.
they were doing all of these talks and discussions on a circuit paid for by
Big
who?
Pharma.
Right. So anyway,
Yeah.
not to fall down the rabbit hole, but I just wanted to catch that on the timeline
Yeah.
nugget. So you were saying, as I'm sorry, you
Well,
were
I'm
saying
like,
timeline.
yeah, like doing some research, like I asked my mother about menopause, right? And she was basically in the dark because her generation, it was kind of a whisper thing among women. You know, it was like they were going through the change.
You're gonna go to a fucking institution.
Yeah,
Right?
yeah, exactly. Yeah, and they were sort of, you know, and God forbid a man should know, as well as Big Pharma was right in there, you know, with the hormone replacement, with what was it? I remember you would get a little booklet with when you started menstruating, and it was what to expect. And it was like, you may feel a little uncomfortable, but you buy these Kotex and Tampax and da 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 da. You weren't supposed to use Tampax if you were a virgin because you might break your hymen. You know, it was like, so, you know, it was scare tactics. It was total, you know, keep the little woman down, right? When I started traveling, I was lucky to go to the South Sea Islands. And one of the things that really opened my eyes was the celebration of a young woman starting her period. And the tribe, the women of the tribe, the crones, the mothers, would bathe her, take her to, I think that's where the red tent came from, where she was taken care of. And she was, you know, informed what was happening to her body, you know, as opposed to in other cultures, a girl started her period, she was immediately sold off into the marketplace, you know, so, or became vulnerable to rape. You know, the old, you know, there was an old line back in my day, if they're old enough to bleed, they're old enough to butcher. You know, can you imagine? You know, and it was the whole thing about my generation. It was, you were to be a virgin till you got married. Thank God for the 60s. You know, that's all I can say. So it was an interesting journey. Watching women evolve, and again, the 70s, the feminist movement, we became more out about what was happening. You know, we became more connected about our physical health as well as our mental health, you know, and, you know, joining groups, reading books, talking to our friends, comparing notes, you know, finding a doctor that was sympathetic to what was happening with us, you know, who had some valid ideas on how to, and I'm not going to say control, I'm going to say how to manage or navigate this journey, because it is a journey that no woman is going to evolve. You know, it's what, you know, it's what happens. And it's like, so it was like, you know, I kind of welcomed menopause. You know, I was done with having periods. You know, I wanted, you know, back in my day, you weren't supposed to go swimming, you know, if you had your period. Yeah. And it was like, okay, you know, and fortunately, as I said before, I had people who helped me manage and navigate, you know, yeah, you know, I had a few hot flashes. Yeah, I'm sure. Yeah, I must have been really grumpy because I went through a separation. Yeah, but I think,
Absolutely not an uncommon thing.
well, I think I got to the point in my life where it's like, wait a minute, I'm 55 years old. I'm tired of this crap. You know, quite frankly, you
That's
know,
what I'm hearing. Yeah, that's
you
what I'm
know,
hearing.
you know, I've got a life to live. You know, I've traveled. I'm smart. You know, enough is enough. You know, I'm on my own, and I have been on my own since the age of 55. You know, and does you know, it was interesting when people were saying, well, you know, what about sex? you know what? After menopause, sex is great because you can't get pregnant. But be careful. Yeah, it's yeehaw and yahoo.
You can still get STDs, so still be careful. But
Oh yeah, yeah. Well, that we know that one too. But yeah, just the fact, yeah, wrap the rascal. Yeah,
yeah.
so, yeah. So it's been an interesting journey. And now at the age of 75 and watching you young women step up, and you're the generation behind me. And just watching you asking more questions, and you've got more knowledge thanks to the internet.
Well,
And
thanks to you. I think to, of like my mother's generation, your generation, of feminists who have, not stood like the hope is, right, as we are working back to reclaiming our power as women, from, hundreds of years of,
yeah, oppression.
whatever. Yep, oppression. We it's thanks to each generation. So thanks to your work as, generations work of, you know fighting for, reproductive rights and birth control and, all of these things, like just saying no to the expectation of what your mothers were supposed to be. I'm Generation X. I'm 53. I have to think about it. Right, by 53, yeah, 53. And so, now Generation X is all sliding into having their menopause transition. And, I have a 17-year-old daughter, and fuck if I want her to not to be just clueless. I mean, in my when you're starting to transition and you don't know what you don't know, you don't even know what the questions, you don't even know what to ask.
Yeah,
Sometimes, I mean, I've known people who I've talked to, a number of women who are like, well, no, I'm fine, or my menopause was fine. I mean, I think, but maybe I think like you sometimes you don't even know what the symptoms are.
let
So
me interject. Let me interject.
yeah.
There are some women um, who don't have the negative symptoms,
Mhm.
you know, or to a lesser degree. There are some that are off the charts with difficulty, but, you know, you have to remember, how much negative feedback did you get? You have to settle down and think about what's happening with you,
Right. Yeah. Thank you.
you.
That's so true,
And
Judith, and thank you of that, because you're right. There are some people who don't experience the symptoms at all. There are
yeah,
people who, and by no means am I suggesting that people don't have, those are people who don't have body awareness. There are people who have tremendous amount of body awareness. And as I said in our little intro, based on your personal health history, even your mental health history, you might not have any symptoms at all. Woohoo! Lucky you, promised land. Right,
yeah,
right
go.
straight through. And but what's fascinating is that because there is no one way, it's all the more reason to welcome all the different ways, so you don't feel like you're just, because it's very isolating and can be very alone, and
Yeah.
I think that I just want to share one note, and then I want you to continue on. But it is a, as I said, it's a physiological, biological, spiritual, cultural, and familial transition. And if you roll into perimenopause depleted, and you have, I mean, that's why I mentioned my daughter, because I feel like this education is so important to start talking about it,
Yes,
because I want her to have the resources, the information, the access, to know what the questions to ask and to roll into it prepared with a plan. I rolled into it completely unprepared and like ran myself ragged. Someone was describing this recently as that, like, when you're in your 40s and 50s, you're like sort of like the meat in the sandwich, right? And
yes,
the meat in the sandwich, like, think of the timing, right? So when our progesterone starts to just dip a little, people think, oh, it's just you don't have estrogen anymore. That's not true. It's that they just have a slow progesterone starts to change. That is the feel good a feel good hormone, right?
Yes.
It's what it regulates mood. And so like, yeah, we start to feel a little physiologically, like it's not just in our minds, it's our physical body starts, we start to feel like we're I don't know, anxious, sad, panic attacks, all of these things. And it's very isolating, right? So, but yet we're also at a time where maybe we're at the height of our career, have children or households, we're running businesses. We are even now at this point starting to probably take care of elderly parents. And it's like, that's where like the brakes go screeching, where you're like, what the fuck is happening to my body? This is when I need all of the all of the energy. This is when I need to push on. But if you know the signs and you're able to slow, what you need is rest, and you need to
Yes.
listen to the body. And I'd love to hear more about your to segue back to you, Judith, about your symptoms, and share, like, I love that you said that you felt supported by your medical professionals, but if you don't mind sharing, you said that you had explored some with hormone replacement therapy. Like, can you share a little bit about that, of what that was like?
Okay. Yeah. Um,
Or
where I live.
if you wanted to go somewhere else, I sort of forgot. It was
No,
like
no,
a
no.
rampage there.
Okay. Okay. Um, yeah, I live in a town that's sort of hippy dippy, right? And you know, and a lot of healers are here, naturopaths and stuff like that. And at the time, for me, the reason I chose hormone replacement was, again, I was going through a lot. I just got out of a relationship. I had a heavy workload. I had my own business. Plus, I was a palliative care worker, which is emotionally interesting, good. And, there's a lot of good stuff about that, a lot of lessons learned. And I just couldn't juggle all these herbs and 20,000 pills. I'm not a good pill taker to begin with, right? And I went, okay, hormone replacement, and it worked for me. It was, the physical symptoms, the emotional symptoms, again, in a group, one of my best groups was a women's group in Alcoholics Anonymous. And, that was pretty funny. That was pretty funny. The stories that we had of our past and our wild antics, and all of a sudden it's like, oh, what's happening here, right? Better get our shit together real quick, And so it was, the hormone replacement, it's not for everybody. You find what you need to do, which works best for you. That's all I can say. I have no judgment on your choice. One of the things that really did help me a lot was I got much more physically active. After being a dancer for 17 years, I sort of became a slug. And I got back into skiing. And I'm not talking about these nice little lady ski things. I'm kicking ass on that hill. I'm dancing a lot, just for fun.
Yeah.
I walk, and I'm performing burlesque at the age of 75.
It's a girl.
Yeah.
Well, I just
And,
wanted to
and
mention.
so, and that's kind of neat, because it's like my audience are mostly young women and men, right? And, the boobs fell down, the thighs are flabby, and it's like, I go, this is what happens, So, and one of my favorite lines is, the lower the boobs, the higher the mind. Hopefully.
I think it's true. I think it's true.
Wait,
Well, and I know
or you
that
walk around like this.
well, and that is one of the things that I know that we both share and a love of burlesque, which is what brought us together, is really, you know, burlesque is very much an irreverent, fuck you to age, body type, age, shape, size, gender, all of it. And so it's been, I know that,
But you also came from a stripping
Mhm.
history where you had to be young, you had to be fit, you had to be beautiful, right? You had to be sexy,
Yeah.
you know, you had
Very
to,
one-dimensional, very one-dimensional sexuality for
so
sure.
you had to play that role. So I think my stripping career gave me a sense of like, I got eyes in the back of my head, as well as a sense of my own body
Mhm.
and my own power. And if I choose to turn it on, fine. Yeah. Do I need to turn it on? Maybe, maybe not.
Most importantly is that you have an on and off switch. It's not that
Yeah.
when you enter menopause, suddenly you're not, the switch is just turned off for you. That's the
No,
propaganda. I
you're
mean, and
still a hot, beautiful woman.
let me tell y'all, if you haven't seen Judith Stein shaking her tatas, Judith Stein is a sexy motherfucker. I'm just telling you. It's on the YouTubes. You can go find it.
Yeah,
Um,
just
but yeah, and I love that there is a place, it exists in the world where, that we, just because we are, women are so much more valuable beyond our reproductive years. And what's wild is you never hear or think about, I certainly didn't when I was younger, is that when you become postmenopausal, women live 20, 30, 40 years
yes.
beyond their their reproductive years. So, there are so many wonderful things that I love, like having friends like you, of all ages who, have paved the way, who have your experiences, that have these like just really beautiful wisdoms, that like, and sometimes the wisdoms are making shitty choices, like that to share, and so, or great choices, but they're, you know what I'm
But
saying?
that's life. I always say the road of life is full of potholes, you know, and it's like some you fall into and you struggle to get out. Some you jump right back in because it was fun. It's like,
Yep.
yes, we know that one, don't we?
Times, yeah.
um, but it's like, as you get older, come on, if you've got a head on your shoulders, if you've got an observant eye, you can see what's going on. I like being 75, other than the fact that, my hip hurts, my ears are going, my eyes are going,
You can't have it all, Judith. You
and,
can't
and
have
I
it all.
haven't had sex with anybody in a long time. But I always believe love the one
Well,
you
let
know.
me just say that's by choice. I will say
That's my
that's by
choice.
choice, my friend, because I have seen a lineup. Get in line, fellas, ladies, whomever. Certainly not for, certainly an option for you. I'm just saying.
Well, it's after a while. It's like it does, you know, um, it's interesting because I have a number of old boyfriends, right, that I've maintained contact over the years, and we all kind of laugh because they're in their 70s, 80s, and we joke and it's like, so you're getting any? And it's like, the guys go, I can't stay hard. And I go, I can't get wet. And we laugh, we go, thank God we had a good time when we were young, you know? And it's like, yeah, and it's really kind of a neat transition with the male, the men of my life, that they are also going through, they're losing the testosterone, they're starting to slow down, you know. Um,
Yeah, I
You
keep,
know,
I definitely am going to have a gentleman or, somebody who, identifies as male to chat about their menopause, because definitely their menopause is changing too. And, I love that you shared that story about the sort of equaling the playing field, right?
yeah,
Um,
you know,
there are
it's
also
like, and they're getting hit with the same pharma biz, all these,
Viagra and all of
yeah,
it.
yeah, yeah, yeah. And it's just like,
I mean, I was just gonna say, if you really want to, there's Viagra and lube. You don't have to stop fucking if you don't want to.
we'd rather sit down and
But if you just want to
drink
go have
wine
some
and
gelato, do that
talk
too.
crap.
Exactly, exactly.
Yeah.
Well, I love that. And so let's see, what else? What else was I gonna ask you? I wanted to go back to HRT for a second, only because for some people, and thank you for sharing that. And I HRT is referred to as hormone replacement therapy. In the language, it's a little, as it's like science is a moving target, right? So it's always changing, and
Yeah. Yeah.
HRT is what is often referred to as hormone
Yes.
replacement therapy, but that can often be relevant to, our trans friends who, are
Yeah.
transitioning as well. So MHT is the information I'm getting to is changing. So like menopause, hormone
Right.
whatever. So using it specifically in that way. And I think that I have to say that I had a lot of misinformation, that it was like sort of giving in. And I don't know where I got this. I fucking made it up. I made this up in my head. And so that it was like, oh, I can do it. I'm going to get through. And I thought
I'm
that,
going to tough my way
yeah,
through.
I'm going to tough my way through it. I am not taking hormones, but now that I have more of an understanding, um, I had that propaganda judgment. So I love that you said, like, do what works for you, but if you're not familiar with that language and that you don't have any judgment, if somebody didn't know what HRT was or why there would be judgment, that's all the weird
Yeah.
intertwining shame and stuff. So it is
But may I interject?
please.
Who cares?
Yeah.
Your it's your journey. It's
Journey and your
nobody's else's.
right.
You do what is right for you. That's part of being a grown-up, independent, free-thinking woman.
Right. Yep.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yep. Yeah, for sure. And that is, really, I think finding, as I'm learning more and finding resources to have, HRT or, menopause hormone replacement therapy is not right for everybody. And it,
No.
that can be dependent on, if your family has a history of breast cancer. It can be dependent on where you are in your cycle. And
Yeah.
so, but it is an option and very different than that, what's his name, who wrote, Feminine Forever, Forever Feminine. They are doing testing where they're seeing where you're deficient, and they're able to do your own, bioidenticals
Yeah.
for just for you, instead of being like, oh, here's a pill that you take. And so there's lots of different options. And so, and I'm with you, Judith, like whatever works for people, you do what works for your body and your unique.
One of my favorite sayings is take 2 crystals and call me in the morning.
Totally.
But yeah, what can I say? Yeah, it's like, it's your body, our bodies ourselves. You make the choices.
Yep.
Educate yourself, and there's so much. Like this morning before we came on here, I'm listening to CBC, Canadian Broadcasting, who's talking about menopause. And the woman's
it's changing.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's open. It's and it's so like, you've got a computer, you've got books, you've got libraries, you've got practitioners. Go educate yourself, and it's not the end of the world. As a matter of fact, it's the beginning of a new world. It's, you're free from that goddamn 5 days of bleeding everywhere.
Everywhere.
Yeah. And it's,
I love Judith, that someone actually, a woman that I met in the Silver Tent, Debs, she and I were having a conversation, and we're talking about, as I said earlier, you build up, your 20s, you're really learning like who you are, and in your 30s, you're building your career, your 40s, you're probably having a family and children, and then when you have that transition, we're birthing other things, businesses, children, homes, from our 20s to our 40s and 50s. And in your 40s and 50s, in that transition beyond, is we're birthing ourselves.
yes.
And it's like, wow, like I want my daughter and the net, like as you have ran with the baton, and our Gen X is taking the baton. My little, what is she? She's not a millennial. She's a whatever that.
Yeah, whatever.
I want her to be set up when she like, this isn't even they're not even gonna have a conversation. I mean, that might be wishful thinking, but the idea of my daughter stepping into her transition, prepared, informed, supported, and celebrated, to be like, now I'm working on me, and like, who am I really, who do I want to be? Because previously there's been a whole lot of being whatever anybody else fucking wants me to be.
You had to be certain people for a job. You had to be a certain, and think about the skills that you acquired during that time that are going to serve you well as you transition. You've got the people skills, how to negotiate, how to read, how to understand, and it's like, your body, even though it still plays tricks on you, it's okay, and it's like, off we go. And it's like a time for you to be somewhat selfish. Just, and as you go through menopause.
After 30 years of serving other people, most women, I don't call it selfish at all. I say, run. You earned it. And you know what? That's why in one of my favorite books that I read recently, it's called "What the Fresh Hell Is This?" But she's like, this is our time, right? Like, to just to have this moment in this transition.
I remember I had a stepson, and I guess it was just the beginning of my menopause. And anyway, he wanted to go traveling, so I drove him to the next town with this backpack that I bought him, right? And said, "Right, if you get work." I'm done. Yeah, I'm done. Yeah. Well, and it's like, it was time, again, that's why one of the reasons I chose to live alone. Yeah. And to be a spinster, right? Just because it was time for me. It was time for,
Well, the thing is, though, is that I mentioned that book because I remember why I mentioned it, is that she is like, postmenopausal women are so fucking punk rock. Like, they don't like give a shit. Like, it is like, I think of all of my life, like I have been like, sort of fake it till you make it. Like, I don't care what people think. Like, I don't care what people think. You transition into that last stage of like you forget that you're supposed to care what people think, right?
Well, my old saying that is not fit for publication. Read lips.
Yeah, right. Oh, Judith, I knew you'd make me blush. Actually, no. I'm having it right now. We should be able to like drink, like have a drinking game, like hot flash, drink. So it makes me look youthful, right?
Yeah, but alcohol, that's the thing. Like, alcohol does, is not that particularly good. A glass of wine and stuff like that is not good. They told me,
hot flashes.
they told me to slow down on my coffee. Well, I'm a complete coffee addict. Yeah,
I
but
know this about you.
I know.
You've been in my home, and I
That's
love
right.
it.
I kept that coffee. I kept that thing. I'm bringing my own next time.
Oh,
But,
going.
um, but yeah, it's like I like, one of the things about being a crone is I can look back and go, that was a hell of a ride, and it was like, yeah, there were tough times. Yeah, there were stupid times. There were joyful times. But when I think about, I had some great adventures. Yeah, I learned a lot. I met a lot of people, that I learned from. Uh, I've laughed heartily with a few,
Just a few.
just a few. And it's like, I can look back at that and I can revel in it.
Yeah.
I can embrace that. And that's really kind of neat. When I think about it.
I think you actually just intuitively answered the last question I had for you, which is, what does it mean to be a wise woman? And I don't know that that's your answer, but that is a pretty lovely nugget of like having that opportunity of having the wisdom to reflect on your journey, and moving forward, and what that means to you, and what it's going to mean like for the next, your next journey.
My next journey. Oh
Well, your
God.
journey, like as we're continuing on,
Yeah.
until we, leave this mortal coil, but yeah.
Well, when I leave this mortal coil, Fanny Annie, who, for those who don't know, was a very famous stripper, said that she was holding a place for me in heaven. I said, well, none of my other friends are going to be there. It's like, hell sounds like a lot more fun.
Yeah, a friend of mine, we used to always joke that like, oh, we're all going to hell. I'm just merely designing my handbasket.
There you go. Yeah. As far as I'm concerned, it's like, as a transition, it's okay.
Yeah.
It's okay. What are the alternatives? Duh. And it's like, take care of yourself, honor yourself, honor that, hot flash. I personally used to like them when I was skiing.
As somebody who's cold all the time, I'm gonna say I'm not. Night sweats, I can do without those, but hot flashes sometimes, they feel pretty good. Being from Minnesota,
we used to call them power surges.
I like that.
There you go. So you just it's a power surge. It's how you and I know it's difficult when you're in the midst of it, but taking the negativity out of it and saying, okay, this sucks, my breasts hurt. Oh, that's one thing good about menopause. I went from a 32A to a 36B. I finally got boobs. And then they fell down. But but like the bottom line is, sometimes it's rough. You've got a lot going on. Sometimes it's really quite funny. You have to, sometimes, I used to just go, oh my God, I can't believe this. But it's a transition, and it's like, I quite like being a crone, I've been practicing.
You're a good one.
Well, I practice my cackle.
I love it. Listen, you're a little bit glitchy, but so I want to just pause for a moment in case wrapping up. If anyone has any questions, I don't know that we have the answers, but if anybody has any questions for Judith or any thoughts.
Thank you.
Thank you. You can, I don't know if you can unmute yourself or if you want to raise your hand. Totally okay if you don't. I just wanted to open that up.
Let me put my glasses on.
Dimity. My dear.
Hello.
Oh,
Hi,
oh,
Timothy.
you're in Australia. Are you in Australia today?
I am. Can I turn my camera on?
Yes,
I'll turn
please.
my camera.
You can all turn your cameras on. I
There
love
we go.
Um, I just love that. That was so fabulous. And what I really zeroed in on is AA and for me, because I'm a member of AA, the crash of estrogen associated with not drinking huge amounts
Ah, yes.
seems to send a lot of people in the rooms into what they think is menopause. But I've got this theory that the crash comes when you get sober too. And also I just love that there's so much information around, and my mother led me through everything, so beautifully. But when it came to menopause, I was going, bring it on, Mum. Tell me how you went. And she was by then 78 and just went, oh, you'll love it. It's fine. You just don't
Yes.
get your period anymore. And I said, but what actually happens? And by then, sort of gone past it, moved on, didn't care. So yeah, and thanks to generations before us, now we've got a whole heap of information. And I have to admit, I've had a dream run, but it wasn't without its moments of what the hell is going on. And when I first saw Laura online, and she described a hot flush as a power surge, I thought, these women are kick ass. I want to hang out with.
Yeah,
Thank you very, very much.
Dimity.
Yeah.
I got sober at the beginning of my menopause. So yeah, it was like, what is this withdrawal or is this menopause? It was trying to define. So keep coming back, girl. All right.
Anyone else have anything they want to chime in?
Don't be shy.
All right.
Hi.
Hi,
So mine's been a little weird. I had some symptoms that started a year ago. I'm 47, so it started about 46, and then they kind of went away, and I was like, huh, that was it. Nice. And then all of a sudden, a month and a half ago, it was every single night. I was waking up every hour on the hour, completely drenched in sweat, and I was just really edgy, very anxious. And then all of a sudden my period just stopped. I didn't have the gradual, spotty something. It just stopped. And I haven't gotten it in 3 months. I didn't think it was going to come on this fast. It came on really fast, I thought, and I also, as 47, I wasn't really thinking it was going to happen now, but I guess it's now. So I'm going into month 3. I've had nothing. I have feelings of it's coming. My stomach gets hard. I feel like, oh my gosh, it's going to happen. And then nothing happens. And it's just been, and then all of a sudden the hot flashes stopped after a month of intensity. It just stopped. And I'm now I'm I feel like I got to be cautious going around a corner. Is it going to happen again? Because that was awful. That was absolutely awful. It was just terrible. I'd be in the middle of meetings and then my neck would just turn red. I'm on Zoom and I'm sweating and they're like, you okay? I'm like, no. I had a wild night last night. I wish that's all it was.
Sounds like you were somewhere between nip and tuck.
But I mean, it's I really enjoyed. I just kind of wanted to come on and share that experience. I'm sure there's more blessings to come, but I really have enjoyed the talk today. That was really, really wonderful. And thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Corey. One thing
Thank
I just
you.
want to add to, you're right where you're supposed to be, Corey. I mean, that's the thing, is it's so different for everybody. Why has no one ever, maybe you know this, I did not know this, menopause transition can be between 8 and 15 years. No one ever told me that. 8 and 15 years, and sometimes more and sometimes less. So that's the thing, is there's these gauges that are sort of for context, but we need to normalize these conversations, and so we can, we know what we're dealing with. So if there aren't any, I'm going to wrap up here, but I just had a couple little more nuggets I wanted. Oh, did someone else? Was someone check? Oh, Gretchen, hi.
Hello, hello, hello. So I think I've only had one hot flash, and I'm about to turn 51, and I had the lovely experience of it in the middle seat of a plane. So maybe it wasn't a hot flash, but none of us could figure out what was going on. And the flight attendants just kept saying, "You can take more clothes off." And I'm like, well, yes, Ophelia has taught me how to do that. So yes, I feel taking these clothes off as I sit here in the middle seat. So I'm not sure.
I hope you did it intentionally.
I did it with speed because I was burning up. I was burning up and was like, is this a panic attack? I've never had one of those before. Is this a hot flash? I've never had one of those before either. And another thing that I just want to throw this out here because I'm really glad Judith was the first to present, because she was a first for me also. I must tell you all that the only time I've ever intentionally touched a lady's boobs was when Judith needed help at Lush with her underboob tape. You are my first and only. You might not be having sex on the regular, but you did let me feel you up, and I appreciate that.
It was lovely for me too, darling.
No, that's sisterhood right there, I'm telling you.
Fixing your boob tape.
Well, Gretchen, the woman who wrote the book, What the Fresh Hell Is This, which I totally recommend. It's hilarious and irreverent, but super, super informational. It's one of my favorites. She's actually was a contributor to the new revised Our Bodies Ourselves. She had a hot flash and went to the hospital. And like literally was having a hot flash, went to the hospital, didn't know what it was. They put her in an ambulance to a further, because she was in some sort of small island, put her in an ambulance, and she went to a hospital, did all sort of tests, and they were like, we don't know. Yeah. Like nobody was like, maybe it's menopause, she's like, I felt, she's like $10,000 of medical bills later. They're like, it's a hot flash. So again, you're not alone.
It's, it's what all women go through. So we support each other. Yeah. And, sometimes you can find the humor, like, watching your friend going, oh my God. And we all go, yeah. And it's like, yeah, it's just being supportive to each other and being part of the sisterhood, and as we transition, I'm lucky I have a group of women crones, and we laugh about it, and
you gotta laugh about it, man.
Oh. Well, it's like I remember my mother telling me, back in the day when I was asking about being a young woman and sexuality, and she explained sex was the most fun you could have without laughing. I had to. That's
a great description.
I had to tell her.
I love it. Well, listen, I want to wrap up here because I don't want to go too long and keep you, but I did put in the chat a link to Judith's Etsy site. Now, not only is she a badass crone and a sexy motherfucker, she is an amazing seamstress. So she has, and I want to say it Kootenai, but it's Kootenai. Kootenai Kate's nightgowns, and she makes these like just absolutely beautiful flannel Victorian nightgowns. So you can
cotton batiste also.
Beautiful.
Vintage inspired.
Yes. So you can check that out. I put the link in there. And then I also wanted to share with you about the Silver Tent, as I had mentioned before. So the Silver Tent is a welcoming and supportive and engaging online international community for women over 50. Sorry, friends, some of you, you'll get there. Created by Francesca Cassini. And members are encouraged to let go of who they thought they were and step into the truth of who they truly are. wise women, valid and valuable, with wisdom worth sharing, whether that's with your children or your grandchildren or your local community or on the world stage. And I just want to thank the Silver Tent and Francesca for supporting Wisdom Circles. And you can check out thesilvertent.com. There's a lot of knowledge there, even if you're haven't reached that 50 point yet, or you know where you're going to. And then our next Wisdom Circle will be on February 20th at 7 p.m., featuring another dear friend of mine who has a master's degree in the science of Oriental medicine as a licensed acupuncturist, Stacy Deegan, whose private practice focuses on supporting women in menopause transition through a CTM, or a traditional Chinese medicine approach, which is going to be really interesting. For those of you who are close, there's the last call for our Activating Courage retreat, which will be a cozy winter exploration of creativity and self-discovery that I'm co-hosting with Melissa Dessart of Creator Space on February 9th through 11th. It's going to be amazing. You can email me if you want more information about that. And lastly, share your stories, ask your questions, share your wisdom, and thank you for joining us. And it's been a lovely discussion. Judith, do you have anything you'd like to share?
No, just thank you for all that joined us for this, and just keep going. If you're going through hell, keep going. Okay.
Love it.
Love you all. And
Mwah, mwah, mwah.
remember, power surges.
Power surges.
Yeah. All right.
Love y'all.
Love you. Bye.